Coming up on the program, the UK's army ready to help ease fuel supply problems as consumers continue a fourth day of queuing up at filling fuel stations in the UK. US Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin and top general are facing Congress over America's military withdrawal from Afghanistan. Plus, 4 people hurt seriously in an explosion and fire in the Swedish city of Gothenburg. A warm welcome to our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. Thanks for joining us. I'm Amarachi Ubani in Lagos. I begin in England, which is currently going through fuel supply problems that has seen people queuing up at fuel stations a fourth day, not because there is no supply, but that there are fears a driver shortage would hit a fuel supply, which is plentiful at refineries.
Britain put the army on standby to deliver fuel from Tuesday after an acute shortage of truckers triggered panic buying that left fuel pumps dry across the land and even raised fears that hospitals would be left without doctors and nurses.
We've taken 18 different steps, of which prepping the army is the latest, and we're starting to see just the first signs of stabilisation, which won't yet be reflected in the queues, but is in the percentage of fuel now available in the underground storage in the actual petrol stations itself.
This week, queues of drivers stretched back from those petrol stations that were still serving in major cities. A post-Brexit shortage of lorry drivers, exacerbated by a debilitating hold to truck driving license testing during COVID-19 lockdowns, has sown chaos through British supply chains, raising the spectre of shortages and price rises in the run-up to Christmas. Tempest afraid as some drivers waited for hours, with fights breaking out. For delivery drivers and taxi drivers, they are worried about the impact on business.
Apart from the anxiety of not being able to work on the back of 18 months of not knowing what's going on, where the next job's coming from, we've just started to get some work and now we've been hit with this. It's massive. Friends of mine have not been able to come to work this morning because they're so low, they can't risk coming out and running out. It's really, really worrying.
Started looking last night. I was driving around for 2 hours. Nothing came by all these up this way, up at Park Royal. Nothing. Got a delivery at Park Royal Asda at about 10 o'clock last night, but the queues were crazy.
Doctors, nurses and unions for teachers, prison and care staff have called for essential workers to be given priority for fuel. Government ministers, fuel companies and petrol stations say there are sufficient supplies of fuel, but that the lack of truckers combined with panic buying has drained the system. To ease the crunch, the government has temporarily suspended competition laws so fuel firms can share information and target areas where supplies are running low. After weeks of mounting pressure, ministers have also announced a plan to issue temporary visas for 5,000 foreign truck drivers.
The VOA's Henry Ridgewell is in London for us. Henry, help us understand what's going on. So there is supply, but the problem is getting it to the fuel stations, right?
That's right. All the petrol companies and the government say there is plenty of fuel in the refineries, which are generally around the coastline. The problem is getting it from those refineries to the petrol stations. And the reason why that's a problem is because Britain, like many countries, is suffering from a shortage of drivers, of HGV drivers who are qualified and able to drive the tankers to get it to the petrol stations. Now, we saw the first effects of that a few days ago, really at the beginning of the weekend, Friday, Saturday last week, and a few petrol stations indicated that they were struggling to get fuel supplies and running out of fuel. And that really escalated into panic buying as the message spread throughout the population. So everybody jumped in their cars and vans and thought they would get ahead of the game and try and get a full tank. And we saw that by Sunday, up to 90% of petrol stations had run out of fuel. It does seem as though the situation has eased a little in the last 24 hours. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been speaking within the last hour, and he said the latest reports are that there are better supplies and that they expect things to return to normal in the next few days.
So the shortage of drivers, could that have anything to do with Brexit?
Well, there's the million-dollar question. And if you ask that question to the government, they will say, no, it's nothing to do with Brexit. It's all to do with COVID and the general shortage of lorry drivers, truck drivers across Europe and across the world. And experts say to some extent that's true. The coronavirus pandemic has disrupted many industries, not least the lorry drivers, many of whom can't get their qualifications. For example, here in Britain, the body that runs driving qualifications, the DVLA, has not been able to do anything like the normal number of tests and give out the number of driving licenses for HGV drivers over the past 18 months. So there has been a shortage caused by that. But you speak to many experts, and not just the government, and they say Brexit has played a role in this. Britain, when it was a member of the European Union, had a big population of foreign workers here, particularly from Eastern Europe in that sector, in the HGV driving sector, and they kept the economy going. They performed a big role and made up a big share of the HGV driving population here. Now, when the coronavirus pandemic hit at the same time as Brexit, you remember, at the beginning of 2020, then many of them went home. Obviously, they wanted to be with their families during the pandemic. They didn't want to be stuck here. Many of them lost their rights to be in the UK. And now that the pandemic is easing, it's much more difficult for them to come back to Britain because they have to have visas, apply for visas in advance, and they're not forthcoming. Now, the government, as you've heard, is offering 5,000 visas to foreign lorry drivers to come here, but that's going to take some time. There isn't a big pool of lorry drivers waiting across the channel in France to come over here. It's going to take a long time for those to balance out.
Yeah, and I know you say that, things have eased up a bit in the last 24 hours, but it's still not enough. I mean, what the government says to the people, the whole panic buying, the reassurances from the visas being granted, that's still not enough to calm people's nerves.
It's not, and I guess it's the problem of trying to predict the behavior of a population, of a group. Somebody I spoke to put it like this, that it's hugely irrational to go panic buying fuel when you look at it as a group, because it's clear that if everybody went at the same time to fill their tanks with fuel, then there are inevitably going to be big queues and shortages. But on an individual level, it is a rational decision because everybody has lives to lead. Many people's livelihoods depend on being able to get around and having fuel in the tanks of their cars, their taxis, their vans, and so on. So many people will join those queues fearing that this could go on for some time. The government has ruled out giving fuel to key workers like doctors, nurses, teachers, and so on, hoping that the crisis will pass in the next few days. But there have been harrowing reports, for example, of cancer treatments being cancelled because doctors can't get to hospital, of hundreds of children, possibly thousands, missing school, both because they can't get there and the teachers can't get there, of elderly people being left on their own because carers can't reach them. So this is a big crisis for the government, and they hope it will pass naturally in the coming days.
Well, we don't want any more crisis stemming from this. Henry, thanks again for keeping us updated.
Good to be with you again.
Over in the United States, U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is answering questions in Congress over America's withdrawal from Afghanistan. Mr. Austin told lawmakers today that the Afghan army's sudden collapse caught the Pentagon off guard as he acknowledged miscalculations in America's longest war, including corruption and damaged morale in Afghan ranks. He did praise American personnel who helped airlift 124,000 Afghans out of the country, an operation that also cost the lives of 13 U.S. troops and scores of Afghans in a suicide bombing just outside the Kabul airport. Some senators blame the Biden administration for what critics say was a shameful end to the 20-year endeavor.
Height of this operation, an aircraft was taking off every 45 minutes. And not a single sortie was missed for maintenance, fuel, or logistical problems. It was the largest airlift conducted in U.S. history, and it was executed in 17 days. Was it perfect? Of course not. We moved so many people so quickly out of Kabul that we ran into capacity and screening problems at intermediate staging bases outside Afghanistan. And we're still working to get Americans out who wish to leave. And we did not get out all of our Afghan allies enrolled in a special immigrant visa program. We take that seriously, and that's why we're working across the interagency to continue facilitating their departure.
It is clear, it is obvious, the war in Afghanistan did not end on the terms we wanted, with the Taliban now in power in Kabul. Although the NEO was unprecedented and is the largest air evacuation in history, evacuating 124,000 people, it came at an incredible cost of 11 Marines, 1 soldier, and a Navy corpsman. Those 13 gave their lives so that people they never met will have an opportunity to live in freedom. And we must remember that the Taliban was and remains a terrorist organization, and they still have not broken ties with Al-Qaeda.
Head of the World Trade Organization, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, says low COVID-19 vaccination rate of around 4% in Africa is devastating, and the trade should help address vaccine inequity. She made the remarks at the opening session of a Geneva-based trade event alongside South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa. Here's more in the Global Update.
So take this opportunity to thank our incredible team.
The head of the World Trade Organization, Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, says that the low COVID-19 vaccination rate of around 4% in Africa is devastating, and trade should help address vaccine inequity.
While nearly 60% of people in developed countries are fully vaccinated, in Africa the figure is barely 4%. This is devastating for the lives and livelihoods of Africans. It is morally unacceptable, and as new variants spread, a threat to the health and economic recovery everywhere.
She made the remarks at the opening session of a Geneva-based trade event alongside South Africa's president, who called for a waiver on patents, saying it's needed to save millions of lives during the pandemic.
This is a proportionate response to the exceptional circumstances presented by the COVID-19 pandemic. This is not the time just to be unidimensionally focused on just profit. This is the time to save lives.
Also speaking at the event, World Health Organization Chief Tedros Ghebreyesus said he expects all countries, including China, to collaborate in the second phase of a probe into the origins of the coronavirus after an initial mission to China.
Knowing the origin of the virus is very, very important, because it's through knowing the origin or what happened that we can prevent the next one. So we expect the collaboration of China and all countries involved.
In other developments, Japan will end its state of emergency in areas where they exist by the end of the week as COVID-19 infections fall nationwide. The announcement by Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga came after officials in charge of the country's pandemic response got backing from medical experts to gradually ease restrictions. The emergency restrictions, which included curbs on non-essential gatherings, are due to expire on Thursday. And Russia has reported 852 deaths from COVID-19 in the past 24 hours, above the previous all-time high recorded last week, amid a spike in cases. Authorities also reported 21,559 new cases, slightly down from the 22,236 reported on Monday. Daily cases in the country started climbing in early September after millions of Russian students returned to schools and colleges.
We have more stories coming up on The World Today. Plus, welcome back. South Korea's defense ministry says it regrets North Korea's latest missile launch amid Pyongyang's calls for the United States and South Korea to scrap their hostile policy. Much earlier today, North Korea fired an unidentified projectile towards the sea off its east coast. South Korea made the announcement with Japan saying it appeared to be a ballistic missile without elaborating on it. Seoul's Defense Ministry spokesman Bo Song-chan says the ministry is analyzing the intention of the missile launch and it is regrettable given the situation of the Korean peninsula, which is needed to be stabilized.
Back in September, both test-fired ballistic missiles.
It's been a lucky day for 30 miners who were trapped underground in eastern Canada 2 days after an accident damaged the mine's lift. The workers at the Totten mine in Sudbury, Ontario, climbed 4,000 feet to the surface using a series of ladders with the support of a rescue team. They'd been trapped since Sunday with the lift system when it became inoperable after a heavy scoop bucket crashed into it and blocked the shaft. After the incident, the miners proceeded to refuge stations where they had access to food and water and remained in contact with their families and staff outside the mine. A company responsible for the mine, Vale, says the rescued miners are in good health. At least 16 people have been injured, 4 of them seriously, following an explosion that tore through an apartment block in the Swedish city of Gothenburg. Residents had to be evacuated from windows and balconies as a fire afterwards spread through the building. Police are investigating the early morning blast and suspect it may have been a deliberate attack. Sweden has seen a surge in gang-related crime in recent years, with firearms and explosive used to settle scores. And staying in Europe, Dutch police have arrested a politician in The Hague on suspicion of involvement in a plot to assassinate Prime Minister Mark Rutte. The Prime Minister's Security Service said Arnold van Doorn, the leader of the Hague Unity Party, was arrested on Sunday. He displayed suspicious behavior as he walked through the same area of the city as Mr. Rutte. Mr. van Doorn was released on Monday after a police interrogation. His lawyer, Anis Boumanjal, told reporters he should not have been arrested because there was no reasonable suspicion of guilt. Speaking of guilt, American R&B singer Robert Kelly, better known as R.Kelly, has been convicted by a federal jury in his sex trafficking trial, where prosecutors accused him of exploiting his stardom over a quarter century to lure women and underage girls into his orbit for sex. Jurors in Brooklyn federal court on Monday deliberated before voting to convict the 54-year-old on all 9 counts he faced after a 5.5-week trial. Kelly kept his head down as the verdict was read, with his face shielded by a white mask. A woman watching from an overflow courtroom cried as the verdict was read, as did others who had waited to learn Kelly's fate in a park adjacent to the courthouse. One supporter played the singer's music there, including the song Shut Up. Devro Kanik, a lawyer for Kelly, told reporters the defense was disappointed and they will be appealing. Kelly faces a mandatory minimum of 10 years behind bars and could face up to life in prison at his May 4, 2022 sentencing. Our correspondent Maria Bird has been monitoring the situation from Washington. Maria, R.Kelly has been in courts before, so what's different this time?
What's different this time is you've had 50 witnesses, and only a few of those were in the defense of R.Kelly. And so we know that this time you have many people coming out to speak against the R&B artist in regards of the sex trafficking and racketing of young women and men. And so, and we also know that there has been a precedent set in America most recently with women speaking out and women being able to voice their opinion. And we've seen others convicted of crimes that are related to sex trafficking or the undue, relationships with women that were not as advised by the women or accepted by the women. And so the Me Too movement, I think, was very strong a few years ago. And obviously this is a case here that is showing how that precedence is today showing itself in court, as we know that the the R&B artist has had a long history of these type of situations and has been brought to court before. But this is very different. I think the times in America and the tolerance for this type of behavior has definitely changed, and the court systems are reflecting that, and the juries are reflecting that.
Throughout the trial, Maria, there really wasn't any strong defense for Kelly. So what does his lawyer say now?
As you stated earlier, what we're hearing is that the lawyer is planning to appeal this. The lawyer is stating, of course, standing by R.Kelly and stating that they will try to continue forward with future litigation and future court appeals.
So I imagine that the rest of America, many people, of course, not shocked, but I mean, quite surprised, I should say, about the conviction. Talk to us about the reactions you're hearing, and then what happens to him now.
The reactions, I think there are some that have been long supporters of R.Kelly. As we said before, this is not new. It's just that he's now been convicted. And so those individuals are saying that, why now? They are stating, obviously, that some of the women, we've seen all types of television series regarding this case in the past, and so they're asking why now. But there are many, many women and men in America that are standing up and saying that sex trafficking was wrong. Sex trafficking is wrong. Any type of behavior with minors and young women that is not accepted by them, but most importantly, the minor issue. These are women that are under the age of 18 that he's had relations with, according to what he was convicted of. And we also know that he married Aaliyah, the passed on R&B artist Aaliyah, at the age of 15. And so there are many that are saying that, we must say enough is enough, no matter if people loved his music or not. This is about the conduct and behavior of young women and men as it relates to sex trafficking.
Maria, just before you go, I mean, what is the reaction now to his music? I know there's been, a little controversy, during this trial, even before this trial, about whether or not people should still listen to R. Kelly's music and if, they should still push it. So what's the situation now?
You will probably begin to see protests against the playing of his music, especially on the radio, especially, a lot of times when this type of high-profile case, you will begin to actually see more records sold from this artist. But those who are strong supporters of those survivors or strong advocates against sex trafficking and who have been speaking out will begin to probably protest his music. And we could potentially see some newer music that might have had some clips of his records on the past beginning to remove that. You might even see other artists speak out against the behaviors that he has been convicted for and begin to denounce some of his music. So we'll probably begin to see a little bit of that over the coming months as to how people are responding to the playing of his music.
Maria, thanks again for joining us, and great talking to you always.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're into the program now, and climate activist Greta Thunberg threw a whole load of blah, blah, blahs as she addressed the delegates at a Milan Youth for Climate conference Fears that climate change is worsening grew after a UN report in August warned the situation was dangerously close to spiraling out of control, with the world certain to face further disruptions for generations to come. Here are Greta's words.
Politically correct green act of bunny hugging or blah blah blah. Build back better, blah blah blah. Green economy, blah blah blah. Net zero by 2050, blah blah blah. Net zero by 2050, blah blah blah. Net zero, blah blah blah. Climate neutral, blah blah blah.
That's a mouthful of blahs. Well, thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Until next time.